Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat. I'm with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other world. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
And when the Lord was seated upon the Mount of Olives, his disciples came unto him, and we besought and entreated him severely, and prayed him, saying unto him, Declare unto us what are the signs of thy coming, and of the end of the world, that we may perceive and mark the time of thy coming, and instruct them that come after us, unto whom we preach the word of thy gospel, and whom we set over in thy church, that they, when they hear it, may take heed to themselves and mark the time of thy coming. And our Lord answered us, saying, Take heed that no man deceive you, and that ye be not doubters, and serve other gods. Many shall come in my name, saying, I am the Christ. Believe them not, neither draw near unto them. For the coming of the Son of God shall not be plain, but as the lightning that shineth from the east unto the west, so will I come upon the clouds of heaven with a great host in my majesty. With my cross going before my face, will I come in my majesty, shining sevenfold. More than the sun will I come in my majesty with all my saints, mine angels. And my Father shall set a crown upon my head, that I may judge the quick and the dead, and recompense every man according to his works. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We come to you every Wednesday evening, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, in live broadcast on Studio B. And you can join us in fellowship for dialogue by going to our Discord channel and logging in for for gathering with others of like mind, and for discussion on all the topics and all the things that we speak upon. But tonight, I wanted to touch upon a couple of things. The passage that I had read from is from the Apocalypse of Peter. And for those that have never read or studied it, like the Gospel of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, specifically chapter 24 in Matthew, Luke 21, and Mark 13, the apostles are gathered around Christ on the Mount of Olives. And after giving the Sermon on the Mount and speaking to the multitudes that were there gathered and feeding them in plenty, the apostles come to him quietly and ask him what would be the signs of his return and of the end of the age. And in those three gospel narratives in those chapters, you get specific detail as to what would be the indicators that would be recognizable in a certain time and a certain age. And specific that the generation that saw the blooming of the fig tree, which that is covered in great detail in the Apocalypse of Peter. Peter is the only one that has an account of asking Yahushua what the parable of the fig tree actually meant and what it symbolically entailed. And it is connected to the regathering of the house of Israel and to them as a people being returned to their land, which is also covered in great detail in other prophecies in Jeremiah and other Old Testament prophets, Ezekiel. But the specific reason why I wanted to read this passage is elaborated upon in Luke, and it says, they ask him, Master, but when shall these things be? And what sign will there be when these things shall come to pass? And he said, Take heed that ye be not deceived, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and the time draweth near. Go ye not therefore after them, but ye shall hear of wars and commotions. Be not terrified, for these things must first come to pass, but the end is not by and by. Then said he unto them, Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and great earthquakes shall be in diverse places, and famines, pestilences, and fearful sights and great signs shall there be from heaven. But before all these things they shall lay their hands on you, persecute you, delivering you to the synagogues and into prisons, being brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake. And so, I'm not sure if you heard about just recently the cover-up by America and also Russia of an incident where two submarines clashed in a battle, and supposedly the Russian sub was hit and many had died, passed away, and there were emergency meetings called between the intelligence agencies of both America and Russia, and that both Vladimir Putin and Mike Pence and Donald Trump, that their regular scheduled meetings were disrupted and emergency briefing occurred as to what had gone down. And so this is a very important topic, and the first I heard of it was from my good friend Stephen Ben-Nun of Israeli News Live. And I'm sure that many of you are familiar with his work. Stephen, being at one time part of the intelligence agencies, he has high-level contacts which keep him informed and abreast of what's going on in the world with regard to what are the clashes, the skirmishes, the battles that are leading up to the Ezekiel war, and what the Illuminati specify and speak about in Albert Pike's vision of 3 global wars as contention to establish a world government, which they successfully did complete with the United Nations as far as manifesting that dream to utilize that organization as means to force all the nations of the world to succumb to their worldwide tyranny. And we learn also through the vision, Albert Pike's vision, that they would establish Israel as nation, which also falls in line with the blooming of the fig tree specified in the Apocalypse of Peter, for it to be the source of contention. What Zechariah says in chapter 12 as a cup of trembling amongst the nations. And that the way that Israel would be recreated and the way that the Palestinian people, who were also part of the Israelites that were forced out, and that the Jewish people that then went in and took over their houses and their land, and that this would be a source of angst for both sides, and that it would be a thorn in the side of these peoples and also the entirety of the world, so that it would be used as catalyst to foment the division and to cause the cataclysmic destruction of both Christians, Zionists, and Islamists, so that there being a power vacuum, the atheistic communists could then step in and be propped up in power to take over control. And this vision, as radical as it was back in the day, has now come to pass in such manner that we are seeing the completion and the end results of what was, centuries of work in order to bring it to where it is. And so as I had said, in the Apocalypse of Peter, Peter asked him specifically, after what I had read in the opening of the show, he says, "And ye take ye," this is Christ speaking, "and ye take ye the likeness thereof, and learn a parable from the fig tree. So soon as the shoot thereof is come forth, and the twigs grown, the end of the world shall come. And I, Peter, answered and said unto him, Interpret unto me concerning the fig tree, whereby we shall perceive it. For throughout all its days doth the fig tree send forth shoots, and every year it bringeth forth its fruit for its master. What then meaneth the parable of the fig tree? We know it not. And the master Lord answered and said unto me, Understandest thou not that the fig tree is the house of Israel? And then it goes on in elaboration, but I'm not going to read all that. But I will read this portion here where it says, Hast thou not understood that the fig tree is the house of Israel? Verily I say unto thee, when the twigs thereof, meaning the Jews and Gentiles, and the 10 houses and the lost tribes gathered with Judah and Benjamin, verily I say unto thee, when the twigs thereof have sprouted forth in the last days, then shall feigned Christ come and awake expectation, saying, I am the Christ that am now come into the world. And so he connects the blooming of the fig tree, the regathering of the nation of Israel, with the coming reign of the Antichrist, which is exactly what Daniel says and speaks about as the little horn, in the vision and Revelation, and the statue of the four kingdoms that come to pass that lead to the establishment of the final beast kingdom. It's my opinion we are in those days, and not only that, but we see that this story of the Russian subs, in my opinion, is connected to what I will read about a vision that a pastor named Dmitry Dudelman had received of the invasion and the attack of America. And so I want to read the story of the sub to you first, and then we'll get into some of this other stuff. But on the Debka file, which is a Russian news site, it says the mystery of the ultra-secret Russian Lashkarik submarine disaster. And this is July 3rd, 2019 at 21:17. It says, at least 14 Russian naval officers and sailors died in a fire on a top-secret Russian AS-12 deepwater submarine on Monday, July 1st. Some have been awarded the highest military honor of Hero of the Russian Federation. But when on Wednesday, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov was asked for details about the disaster, he declined, saying that information about the vessel would not be released because it is, quote, is classified, unquote, as a state secret for protecting the country's national security. Regarding the crew, Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu disclosed only that there were unique military specialists, highly qualified professionals, performing important research on the Earth's hydrosphere. Neither cited the vessel's name. However, Debka Files military and intelligence sources have learned that the AS-12's work was so secret that officials only mentioned its nickname, Lashkarik, which has a double connotation. In the 70s, Russian TV ran an animation series built around a horse made up of small balls known as Lashkarik. The stricken submarine was also made of interlinked titanium balls. But the most secret department of the Russian Defense Ministry, whose function are known to very few insiders, is also referred to as Lashkarik. The nickname therefore pointed to the submarine's highly classified missions. One premise is that the vessel was engaged either in testing a new Russian secret underwater weapon or in a covert operation against a top-secret American object of some kind. Its exact location when the fire broke out and its cause, whether an explosion or an attack, remain hidden. This information may not come to light for years to come, but just as intriguing is the fact that on Tuesday, June 2nd, when the Russian leadership met urgently in the Kremlin in connection with the submarine disaster, top officials were also called to the White House for an emergency consultation. What did Washington have to do with the Russian submarine disaster? The two powers are evidently colluding to cover up what happened. You will find much more about this mysterious episode in the coming issue of Debka Weekly, out on Friday, July 5th. Now, there was another report that was released, and it is entitled, "What Attacked a Russian Submarine on a Retrieval Mission in the Arctic?" This was written by Dave Hodges of the Common Sense Show. He says, One of my military sources once told me that Putin intends to occupy the North Pole and is willing to fight for the right to do so. With Goldman Sachs and their interlocking interests at the Federal Reserve buying up a substantial portion of the world's gold, they need to have hedge against the dropping price of gold, and the resource-rich North Pole provides that insurance. However, if one were to just read the headlines of the mainstream media, one would think that nothing but the wrapping of a Christmas presents by Santa Claus is the only activity going on at the North Pole. Yet both American interests and the Russian military are vying for control of the region and have been for the past 12 years. Now, those of you that are familiar with my work, you know that my 19th book was a book called Paradise, Sides of the North, and the Mount of the Congregation. And in that book, it's the trilogy for my Flat Earth and Firmament Biblical Cosmology series. And in that book, I go into great detail as to the North Pole being the center of the earthen plane, but also that at the North Pole, there is what is called the Rupes Negra, which is a black lodestone mountain, a magnetic mountain which attracts all the compasses of the world, and that this mountain is surrounded by a great whirlpool called the abysmal chasm, the bottomless pit, and that this whirlpool leads into the interior of the earth, and that it also sucks in the world's oceans for 6 hours and then ejects them for 6 hours twice a day, causing what are these cycles of high and low tide on the plane of the earth. And so there's what is cited in the scriptures and also in ancient lore and testimony from ancient adventurers in a book called the Inventio Fortunata, a 14th century book on the travels of various individuals, even King Arthur, to that particular region of the world, and how even Odysseus in the Iliad and Virgil's Aeneid, and also the story of Jason and the Argonauts, they speak of encountering this sea creature, the sea monster called Sharbertus. And it's in my opinion that this sea monster is the whirlpool spoken about by many mythical legendary stories. And this particular structure is also cited on Gerardus Mercator's 15th century map. I think it's 1496, if I'm correct. But on his map, at a high northern latitude parallel, he describes the existence of what is regarded in Celtic folklore as Helvelgamur, the navel of the world, and that this navel of the world is where the oceans of the world are sucked in an indwelling spout. It's also mentioned in the book of Enoch and by King Solomon in Ecclesiastes. In the Targum version of the Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 7, it's called the spout of the world. And anyways, it's my contention that while people are being distracted to seek out and to want to explore the Antarctic Circle and the outer perimeter of the world. The true intrigue for me is the northern pole. And so anyways, let me continue with story here. We are clearly living in end times prophecy, and as proof of that statement, we are seeing wars and rumors of wars appearing almost daily. In the latest example of this prophecy, we witnessed catastrophic damage to a Russian submarine, resulting in the deaths of 14 sailors from a crew of 25. Additionally, there is an isolated and very unconfirmed report that an American submarine was torpedoed and sunk near Alaska in the vicinity of the Arctic. I want to stress that this report at this time should be viewed with suspicion. Then why report it? Wars and rumors and wars. However, when it comes to the Arctic, I have previously identified this region as the future site of World War III, and I did so over 5 years ago. Before an analysis of the damage done to a Russian submarine on July 1st and the questionable report of the sinking of an American submarine by the Russians, it is important to consider the recent history of this subject in order to establish a contextual background before a critical analysis can be offered. All right, I'll read a little bit more. International law and the Arctic, which this is interesting because we know that in Antarctica we have the treaty that prevents even exploration of it. And it's the one part of the world which oil companies are not allowed to go into or tap or even gain permit for exploration and, setting up for extraction, which oil companies never allow laws or countries or any treaty or anything like that to keep them out of a certain place. But yet the oil companies have not made a fuss about gaining access to the Antarctic, which is intriguing to me. But anyways, here now we have, under the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, which was finalized in 1982, countries can lay claim to the ocean floor well beyond their borders, so long as they can provide convincing scientific evidence to prove that a particular seabed is an extension of their continental shelf. Already, countries have sovereign rights to resources within 200 nautical miles of their territorial waterways. For a country to determine whether they have economic sovereignty beyond that distance, the UN agreement requires comprehensive mapping that establishes some sort of geological justification for the claim. And where the Arctic is concerned, Canada, the U.S., Norway, Russia, and Denmark have been amassing scientific evidence for more than a decade in an effort to increase their piece of this resource-rich pie. Important interview with Sweden's Agneta Nordberg. Agneta Nordberg, the former vice chair of the Swedish Peace Council, a member of the steering committee in the International Peace Bureau, and 5 years ago she was highly concerned that Sweden was being used by the United States and its NATO allies to conduct their war games on Swedish soil. Sweden is a supposed neutral country and has signed agreements in opposition to exactly what is going on, which are secret war games on its soil. And if it were not for a Norwegian military plane crash into Mount Kebnekaise, the world would never have discovered these secret war games taking place in northern Sweden and Norway. Nordberg stated that the reason for the war games is because of the melting ice, which has exposed the vast amounts of mineral resources, the largest in the world. It is not an overstatement to proclaim that Whoever controls the Arctic will someday control the world's economy. The rumors of Canada's involvement as an American proxy force can be substantiated. It is now verifiable that the Canadians are working on a new Navy base, and China is in the process of interjecting themselves into the conflict as well. 10 years of secret Arctic U.S. war games. Since 2007, there have been massive NATO Arctic war maneuvers in both Sweden and Norway with all of NATO, and specifically the United States. One of the war games was dubbed the Nordic Air Meet in 2007, where most of NATO took part in massive war games designed to protect interests in the Arctic from Russian incursion. And again in 2009, Operation Loyal Arrow was held, which was the largest air war game in history involving the northern part of Sweden, Norway, and also Finland. These Arctic war games have continued with the cold response No E1, a winter maneuver in the northern part of Sweden and northern Norway. And another war game took place in March of 2012 known as the Cold Response. Number 2, in a very provocative move, both NATO and the U.S. have installed an advanced radar system only a few kilometers from the Russian border known as the Vardo radar system. Vardo is dangerous because it is embedded within a missile defense system. This system is a checkmate against Russian offensive missile weapon systems located near the Arctic. The installation of Vardo is an act of aggression and in some circles is considered an act of war, and that is where this is likely heading. Russian military actions and intentions. Now compare the Russian Arctic mineral retrieval activities, and the military significance should jump off the page at the reader. There are additional Russian Arctic territorial claims which conflict with the U.S. territorial claims. Russia is making several territorial claims in relation to several Arctic shelf areas and planning to defend their claims to the United Nations. After reading the final section of this article, I believe the Russian intention of obtaining UN approval is merely window dressing. They are preparing to take what they want by whatever means necessary. The Russian economic interest in the North Pole is clear and is illustrated by the map. This is Russia's insurance policy to following oil and gold prices, which is cutting into the heart of the Russian economic empire. The Russians have been in war mode for a decade, and the Arctic war mode. I do not see how a reasonable person could not read the following accounts of Russian military buildup in the Arctic and not conclude that the spark of World War III will not begin here. In 2014, Russians tested the world's most powerful vacuum bomb, which unleashed a destructive shockwave with the power of a nuclear blast. The military said on Tuesday, dubbing it the father of all bombs, that this is the most powerful non-nuclear bomb in the world. In fact, many experts believe that this bomb does pack a nuclear punch. This would be the weapon of choice in the coming Arctic conflict because it would kill soldiers, dismantle military equipment without destroying the surrounding military mineral resources, which is the point of the coming conflict. And to add insult to injury, we know now that the Russians have developed a supersonic torpedo, and this could figure in prominently to the developing story involving the Russian submarine. I would add that this supersonic torpedo has been tested and has enough punch to bring down aircraft carriers. And it can't be stopped. the military systems sent to knock out, to knock down missiles can't target it. They're just simply not fast enough. All right, now to the spy submarine being attacked. The apparent attack upon a Russian spy submarine engaged in a retrieval mission is beginning to draw attention. The Kremlin has said that it is not planning to identify the submarine involved in Monday's fire that cost the lives of at least 14 servicemen or release any details about its mission. However, there are some details that are emerging from quiet voices from the intelligence community who are not going to tolerate disinformation being spread about the situation. I received a call from my most trusted insider source, a former high-ranking RSOF member. The source informed me of the following. The Russian submarine accident occurred on board the Losharik, one of the Russian Navy's secretive spy subs. The accident, quote-unquote, also involved a submersible craft that the Losharik had launched, or its large Delphin-class mothership submarine, the BS-64 Podmoskvai. All right, and so what I want to read now, tying this story into the end times and to the wars and rumors of wars, is a vision that Dmitry Duduman received on a Russian invasion of America, and how what it says in Albert Pike's vision that the Zionists would be pitted against the Islamists, and that these two forces, the Christian world, the Zionist Jews, and the radical Islamists, they would be allowed to destroy each other. And then the atheists, the communists, would come forward to take control, take power, and to take over the world. And interestingly enough, it says that after such occurrence happens, that then they would introduce into public conscience and to the public view the unbridled worship and the Luciferian doctrine connected to what they cite in the protocols as the king of the world, and that is the Antichrist. And so these things are biblically and prophetically linked to the coming reign of the Antichrist. And so I'll read a little bit of background. Dmitry Duduman. He was a Romanian pastor that smuggled Bibles into Russia. He was captured and tortured by an electric chair. He was close to death, and then Gabriel the archangel came to him, ministered to him, and by the grace of God, he was expelled out of Romania. When he moved to America, Duduman received a vision from the Lord, and Gabriel showed him all of California, Las Vegas, New York, Nevada, and Florida, and was told that these cities were as Sodom and Gomorrah, and that in one day it would burn. And this, in my opinion, is the Revelation 17:18 and Ezekiel 38 and 39, the war. And it describes it in his vision, that the destruction of Mystery Babylon, which in this vision, and as I explained it in my fourth book, Lucifer, Father of Cain, on what is Mystery Babylon, and published in 2010, I explained that Mystery Babylon is America, and that America is also described in Jeremiah 50 and 51 as the nation with unwalled villages, and the hammer of the nations, which, we are that nation that have been destroying all others and attacking all others, the hammer of the nations. And so, again, in my opinion, America is Mystery Babylon. And so I'll describe the vision. In one day, Russia will attack America by sea and destroy America by nuclear weapons. The people of the Lord are instructed to flee into the wilderness to escape from sudden destruction in the protection of Jesus. The nations that will attack and destroy America are Russia, Cuba, Nicaragua, Central America, Mexico, and two others that were forgotten, but one may be China, according to Henry Groover's vision of the destruction of America. It was late at night, and I couldn't stay inside because of the smell. I was sitting outside on a rock. A light came toward me. The fear of cars came with me. The Romanian police tried to run over me with cars. That's why I jumped up. The light surrounded me. Out of the light, I heard the same voice. It said, "Dmitri, why are you so despaired?" I said, "Why did you punish me? What did I do that was so rotten that you brought me to the United States? I have nowhere to lie my head down upon. I can't understand anybody." He said, "Dmitri, didn't I tell you that I am here with you also? I brought you here to this country because this country will burn." "Then why did you bring me here to burn? Why didn't you let me die in my own country?" "Dmitri, have patience and I will tell you. Get beside me." I don't know what it was, brothers. I got beside the angel. He showed me all of California. He showed me all the cities of California. And then he showed me Las Vegas. You see what I have shown you? This is Sodom and Gomorrah. In one day it will burn. He said its sin has reached the Holy One. He showed me another great city. He said, "Do you know what city this is?" I said, "No." He said, "This is New York City. This is Sodom and Gomorrah. In one day it will burn." He showed me Florida. He said, "This is Florida. This is Sodom and Gomorrah. In one day it will burn." He didn't let me say a word until he brought me back to the place we had left. And then he said, "Now, Dmitri, you can ask me questions." He said, "I brought you to this country, Dmitri. I want to wake up a lot of people. I love this country and I love the people. I want to save them. America, but America will burn." I said, "How can I save them? I can't even speak their language. Who knows me here? How will they call me?" He said, "Don't worry. I will be ahead of you. I will make great healings among the American people. You will go to television stations, radio stations, and churches. Tell them everything I tell you. Don't hide anything. If you try to hide anything, I will punish you. America will burn." How will America burn? It is so powerful. He said the Russian spies have discovered where the most powerful nuclear missiles are in America. It will start with the world calling for peace. Peace. Then there will be an internal revolution in America, started by the communists. The government will be busy with internal problems. Then from the oceans, Russia, Cuba, Nicaragua, Central America, Mexico, and two other countries, which I cannot remember, will attack. The Russians will bombard the nuclear missile silos in America, and America will burn. I said, "What will you do with the church?" He said, "The church has left me." I said, "How? Don't you have people here?" He said, "People in America honor people. The honor that should be given to God, they give to other people. Americans think highly of themselves. They say, 'I serve God,' but they don't. In the churches there is divorce, adultery, fornication, sodomy, abortion, and all kinds of sin. Jesus Christ doesn't live in sin. He lives in holiness. I brought you here so you could cry out loud. Don't be afraid. I am with you. Tell them to stop sinning. God never stops forgiving. Tell them, repent. He will forgive them. Tell them to start preparing themselves so I can save them in the day of trouble. If you call me to speak, God loves you. That's what the angel of God told me. Whoever I love, I want to wake. I will put on their hearts to call you. Don't hide anything, or I will punish you. Stop sinning and repent. He will forgive, and we will have salvation. I said, how will you save the church if America will burn? He said, tell them as I tell you, as he saved the 3 young men, threw the oven on fire, and Daniel from the mouth of the lion. That is how I will save them. Tell them to stop sinning and repent. I have blessed this country because of the Jews that are here. I have 7 million Jews here. They haven't tasted war or persecution. God blessed them more than anyone else. Instead of thanking God, they started sinning and doing wickedly. Their sins have reached the Holy One. God will punish them with fire. Israel doesn't recognize the Messiah because they place their trust on the power of the Jews in America. When God will hit America, all the nations will be terrified. God will raise up China, Japan, and many other nations, and they will beat the Russians. They will push them back to the gates of Paris. There they make a peace treaty, but they will make the Russians their leader. All of the nations with the Russians as their leader go against Israel. It's not that they want to. God makes them. Israel doesn't have the help of the Jews in America anymore. In their terror, when they see what is coming, they will call upon the Messiah. The Messiah will come to help Israel, and then the church of God will meet him in the clouds. Are you ready to meet Jesus Christ? Are your wedding clothes clean? If there are still spots on the clothes of your soul, then the blood of Jesus Christ still has power to cleanse sins. Jesus Christ will live with the church on the Mount of Olives. He himself will fight against the nations. I said, if you are the angel of God, everything you tell me has to be written in the Bible. If it is not, then I can't tell the Americans. Tell them to read Jeremiah 51, verses 8 through 15. He named it the Mystery Babylon, the great adulteress. Also, Revelation chapter 18, the entire chapter, there it says clearly what will happen to America. Why did he name it the Mystery Babylon? Tell them because all the nations of the world immigrated into America, and America accepted them. America accepted Buddha, the devil church, the sodomite church, the Mormon church, and all kinds of wickedness. America was a Christian nation, but instead of stopping them, they went after their gods, and because of this, he named them Mystery Babylon. So you know that truly I have been sent by God. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., someone will come to give you a bed. At 10:30, someone will come to pay your rent. At noon, someone will bring you a car and give you a bucket of honey. Brothers, it happened as the angel had said. At 9, someone rang my doorbell and said, I brought you a bed. I could not sleep all night long. God told me that you were from Romania and that you need a bed. At 10:30, someone else rang my doorbell and handed me a check for $500 and said, God told me to bring you $500. At noon, someone came and gave me a car and a bucket of honey. You might say, why? We trust in God. We have God on our side. On our dollar bill, it has "In God We Trust." How are our lives? We go after the foreign gods. The American church has adultery, fornication, sodomy, divorce, and abortion. If we repent with all of our hearts and call Jesus to help us, we will stop sinning. We know that when Jesus comes, we will meet him in the clouds. The angel also said, before the internal problems begin in America, your country, Romania, will have a revolution. This was fulfilled December 22nd, 1989. All right, when we return back, I'm going to share some information about Bitcoin, decentralized, as far as money, the recent run up in gold, and just, as far as just to give you a pulse of the affairs of the world. We'll look into that, and then I want to share something that is of intrigue. Well, I'll save it for when we return, and I think you'll find it of interest. But, these are very strange and difficult times, and many people are being challenged. And a lot of people are, in my opinion, being forced to make a decision about their faith. That a lot of people in this time are hopeless, and others are complacent and comfortable in their pleasure. And we see that, especially with the advent of the internet, that even children, they have access to porn. And porn has become a dominating factor in a lot of people's lives. And that the carnal aspects of this world, drugs, the abuse of them, getting high, and, just seeking pleasure and seeking to indulge in it. And even at the expense of life and family relationships, people are giving up their responsibilities, not taking care of themselves or others. Children are being abandoned, and we have a lost generation, struggling, suffering. It's the whole thing of Alice Bailey's 10-point plan to destroy the family has really come to light, and so many are suffering. All right, we'll be right back. And things like Seattle and Los Angeles, whole cities are being destroyed, communities. We'll be right back for second hour. All right, welcome back, everybody, for second hour. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio. And I was speaking about, before the break, just the prophetic. And really, there's been a number of individuals, pastors and preachers, which a lot of them I respect, that have had, like Dimitri Duduman, vision of an attack on America, and a lot to do with, Russian and Chinese invasions and the whole thing with the Ezekiel War, the setup for all of that. And so there seems to be multiple confirming witnesses. And like I said, and as Dimitri also asked of the angel, Gabriel, He asked him to verify in the Bible where these things are spoken of. And as I said, when you read Jeremiah chapters 50 and 51, you read of this country, the hammer of all the nations, that attacks and destroys others, but that there are caterpillars within its own midst that they grow and then turn on this particular nation. And it's a nation of unwalled villages, meaning that it largely grew up in peace and safety and comfort and never was really attacked on its mainland. And because of that, it never had to really properly secure or to build up armament, the fortresses around its populaces. And so it's aptly called a nation of unwalled villages. And we know that with regard to the New World Order, that America is the military arm of the New World Order power structure, that London is the financial arm, and that Jerusalem is the spiritual, and that these three coming together form the power of what is the New World Order, the synagogue of Satan, in that they are the seat of corruption and the bloodline elites. They rule this organization and they have controlled it for a long time. And all those that are in service to it, they all bend the knee to and have the whims, everything that they are to carry out, to follow, all the plans and all the centuries of orchestration are manipulated by these agenture provocateurs. And even though many people believe the protocols of the learned elders of Zion to be propaganda, disinformation, and made up story, these things are prophetic. And being prophetic, they show the plan of how it is that the elites establish, control, and manipulate the workings, the fate and the destiny. And of course, it's God who controls all things, and that they are really fulfilling his bidding. But they believe themselves to be outside of his control. And yet the New World Order plan, which they may not understand unless they really know and study Bible, like Satan, certainly he knows. And his plans fall in line with God's prophecy and fulfill what is prophetically laid out in the framework of, the vision of the nations, the wars and rumors of wars, everything. Prophecy tells the end from the beginning. And Satan also follows the same plan. which is confirming witness, because if you really want to know what's going on, you really want to understand what we are being led to and how it will all unfold. Well, you study Bible prophecy, and then you go and you study the blueprint laid out by the Illuminists, and they fall completely in line with one another. And understanding that, then you can then really understand the end times and how things will unfold. Because the conspiracy is the same thing as prophecy. And so what I wanted to share with you now is not, I don't buy into this 100%, but I think it's interesting what the individual writes about, because there are, again, interesting parallels with what I've been talking about and what I've been covering. And what this is a post that is found on Reddit from the Bitcoin Time Traveler, is what these particular statements are referenced about. And they have connection to, for those that don't know what Bitcoin is, it is a cryptocurrency that is digital, and that being used and being created in a manner that is decentralized and outside of the hands of governments and institutions, banking and industry, that there's what is referenced in the creation of every Bitcoin. It's called blockchain. That the infrastructure of blockchain is based upon proof of work, and it verifies every transaction of Bitcoin everywhere that it has been sold and bought, and the entire lifetime and history of it is saved on blockchain. And so it's unique in that there will be a finite number, 21 million Bitcoin produced, and that a lot of this has already been lost, and that being a finite amount, people believe because there's only, a small number of it and it can't be printed again, that it's being implemented and used as a store of value as digital gold, that it will continue to increase in price. And even though Bitcoin's only had a market to where it's been traded less than, 3 or 4 years, where it was actually available to the public in a large way, that Bitcoin ran up in price from just a few dollars each to over $20,000. I think it was right at $20,000 before the price crashed, receded, and then over the course of last year, it bottomed out at $3,400. And over this summer has been running up in price and just recently reached a $14,000 high. And this particular individual, the story that I'm going to read from, he says he's from the year 2025, which I think that number is interesting to me as well, because in the story of the blooming of the fig tree, 2017 is a very interesting year in that the Revelation 12 sign of the Virgin clothed with the sun, with the moon beneath her feet, and a crown of 12 stars. This actually happened on the Feast of Passover. The Feast of Trumpets. Last year, 2017. And this was the 70th year anniversary of the establishment of Israel. And what is interesting about that is that a generation is cited in Psalms 90 verse 10 as being 70 to 80 years. And so, and I had always thought that the 7 years of tribulation would occur right before the blooming of the fig, not the blooming of the fig tree, but the passing of Revelation 12 and the unfolding of that particular sign. But it did not. And so having to reconsider my thought, Revelation 12, the unfolding of it, now I take, if we play it out to 80 years and consider that, then it takes us to the year 2027, 2028. And these particular, supposedly the Bitcoin time traveler is from 2025. And so let's hear this and then I'll comment on it. All right, it says, I am a time traveler from the future, here to beg you to stop what you are doing. All right, again, I'm not giving any credence, not saying this is real in any manner, but I'm just bringing it to your attention just because I think it's of interest and it fits in line with some of the things that I have been talking about with regard to prophecy. So, continuing. I'm sending this message from the year 2025. Things are looking bleak here, and some of you will carry blood on your hands. If you don't believe me, please move on, as I have no way of proving to you I'm really who I claim to be. I don't want to waste any of your time, so I'm merely going to explain what happened. On average, every year so far, the value of Bitcoin has increased by about a factor of 10, from $0.1 in 2010 to $1 in 2011 to $10 in 2012 to $100 in 2013. And from now on, there's a slight slowdown as the value increased by a factor of 10 every 2 years, to $1,000 in 2015, to $10,000 in 2017, to $100,000 in 2019, and $1 million in 2021. From here onward, there's no good way of expressing its value in dollars, as the dollar is no longer used, nor is any central bank issued currency for that matter. There are two main forms of wealth in today's world: land and cryptocurrency. There are just over 19 million Bitcoin known to be used in the world today, as well as a few 100,000 that were permanently lost, and we're still dealing with a population of just over 7 billion people today. On average, this means the average person owns just under 0.003 Bitcoin. However, due to the unequal distribution of wealth in my world, the mean person owns just 0.001 Bitcoin. That's right. Most of you reading this today are rich. I personally lived next to an annoying young man who logged into his old Reddit account 2 years ago and discovered that he had received a tip of 0.01 Bitcoin back in 2013 for calling someone, I'm not going to say the word, but basically, a gay person, a very derogatory term. When he was a 16-year-old boy, upon making this discovery, he bought an airline ticket, left his house without telling anyone anything, and went to a citadel. What is a citadel, you might wonder? Well, by the time Bitcoin became worth $1,000, services began to emerge for the Bitcoin rich to protect themselves as well as their wealth. It started with expensive safes, then began to include bodyguards, and today, earlies are termed for early adapters, as well as those rich whose wealth survived the transition, live in isolated gated cities called citadels, where most work is automated. Most such citadels are born out of the fortification used to protect places where Bitcoin mining machines are located. The company known as Islamister to you is known to me as a city where Mr. Friedman rules as a king. In my world, soon to be your world, most governments no longer exist. As Bitcoin transactions are done anonymously, and thus most governments can enforce no taxation on their citizens. Most of the success of Bitcoin is due to the fact that Bitcoin turned out to be an effective method to hide your wealth from the government. And whereas people entering rogue states like Luxembourg, Monaco, and Liechtenstein were followed by unnamed drones to ensure that governments know who is hiding wealth, no such option was available to stop people from hiding their money in Bitcoin. Governments tried to stay relevant in my society by buying Bitcoin, which just made the problem worse. By increasing the value of Bitcoin, governments did so in secret, of course, but my generation's Snowdens are, in fact, greedy government employees who transferred Bitcoin to their own private account and escaped to an anarchic places where no questions are asked as long as you can cough up some money. The four institutions with the largest still accessible Bitcoin balance are believed to be as following. Islamister, 50,000 Bitcoin. The IMF's Currency Stabilization Fund, 70,000 Bitcoin. The government of Saudi Arabia, 110,000 Bitcoin. And the North Korean government, 180,000 Bitcoin. Economic growth today is about 2% per year. Why is this? If you own more than 0.01 Bitcoin, chances are you don't do anything with your money. There is no inflation and thus no incentive to invest your money. Just like the medieval ages had no significant economic growth as wealth was measured in gold, our society has no economic growth either, as people know their 0.01 Bitcoin will be enough to last them a lifetime. The fact that there are still new Bitcoin released is what prevents our world from collapse so far as it seems. But people fear that the decline in inflation that will occur during the next block halving may further wreck our economy. For those that don't know, halving is that, like we have one coming up for Litecoin in less than 50 days, is that the mining of that cryptocurrency becomes reduced so that only half of what used to be available for miners doing the proof of stake work, that no longer can they receive that much for doing that work. And so the smaller quantity of available Bitcoin or Litecoin or whatever cryptocurrency makes the price and the value increase exponentially. Usually that's what happens. What happened to the Winklevoss twins? I don't know if you know who the Winklevoss twins are, but they were some of those, the two that were involved with Facebook and that received a huge lump sum for their part in the creation, or, you know, Mark Zuckerberg has swindled them out of their portion of Facebook, but they were awarded a lot of money and they created Gemini cryptocurrency exchange. Well, now these guys in this particular world are said to be very, very wealthy rich. But that didn't pay off for them because it says here, the Winklevoss twins were among the first to die. After seeing the enormous damage done to the fabric of society, terrorist movements emerged that sought to hunt down and murder anyone known to have a large balance of Bitcoin or believed to be responsible in any way for the development of cryptocurrency. Ironically, these terrorist movements use Bitcoin to anonymously fund their operations. Most people who own any significant amount of Bitcoin no longer speak to their families and lost their friends because they had to change their identities. Have also been a few suicides of people who could not handle the guilt after seeing what happened to the bag holders. The type of skeptical people who continue to believe it would eventually collapse even after hearing the rumors of governments buying Bitcoin. Many people were taken hostage, and thus it is suspected that 25% of Bitcoin rich actually physically tortured someone to get him to spill his password. Why didn't we abandon Bitcoin and move to another system? Well, we tried, of course. We tried to step over to an inflationary cryptocurrency, but nobody with an IQ above 70 was willing to step up first and volunteer. After all, why would you voluntarily invest a lot of your money into a currency where you know your wealth will continually decline? The thing that made Bitcoin so dangerous to society was also what made it so successful. Bitcoin allows us to give into our greed. In Africa, surveys show that an estimated 70% of people believe that Bitcoin was invented by the devil himself. There's a reason for this. It's a very sensitive issue that today is generally referred to as the tragedy. The African Union had ambitious plans to help its citizens be ready to step over to Bitcoin. Governments gave their own citizens cell phones for free, tied to their government ID, and thus governments sought to integrate Bitcoin into their economy. All went well until the tragedy, that is. A criminal organization believed to be located in Russia exploited a hardware fault in the government-issued cell phones. It's believed that the entire continent of Africa lost an estimated 60% of its wealth in a period of 48 hours. What followed was a period of chaos and civil war until the Saudi Arabian and North Korean governments, two of the world's major superpowers due to their authoritarian political systems, unique ability to adapt to the Bitcoin challenge, divided most Africa's land between themselves and were praised as heroes by the local African population for it. You might wonder, what is our plan now? It's clear that the current situation cannot be sustained without ending in a nuclear holocaust. I am part of an underground network who seek to launch a coordinated attack against the very infrastructure of the internet itself. We have at our disposal about 20 nuclear submarines which we will use to cut all underwater cables between different continents. After this has been successfully achieved, we will launch a simultaneous nuclear pulse attack on every densely population area of the world. We believe that the resulting chaos will allow the world's population to rise up in revolt and destroy as many computers out there as possible until we reach the point where Bitcoin loses any relevance. Of course, this outcome will likely lead to billions of deaths. This is the price we are forced to pay to avoid the eternal enslavement of humanity to a tiny elite. This is also the reason we contacted you. It doesn't have to be like this. You do not have to share our fate. I don't know how, but you must find a way to destroy this godforsaken project in its infancy. No, this is a difficult thing to ask of you. You believed you were helping the world by eliminating the central banking cartel that governs your economies. However, I have seen where it ends. And that's where that ends. Now, I would bring out that he says that, a small elite will rule the world via the cornering of the market of Bitcoin. Well, a small elite already rules the world, and they currently print money out of nothing, out of thin air, and they circulate it to the people of the world and lend it to governments of the world at interest. That's the kind of power that this elite already possesses. And so there's nothing we can do about that. In my opinion, the terrors that rule over this world, their control will not be taken from them until Christ comes again in second advent. That's my opinion. And so the eye at the top of the Illuminati pyramid, it represents Satan, the powers, the principalities, the rulers of darkness, the wickedness in high places, the archons which rule over this world, the devils, the demons, legion. This is who we contend with. Truthfully, these are the individuals that, not understanding what's going on in the world, unless you're able to grasp it in this manner and to really examine what's going on with the larger reasons for our being here at this time. Because, it's not about money. It's not about jobs. It's not about personal wealth, materialism, gathering up and having a house full of stuff and nice cars and nice items and nice things. That's not what this world is really about, even though most, and certainly the elitists that design the matrix and Satan and the powers that rule over it, they want you to believe that the American dream is what we should be striving to achieve, that we should get a good education so you can get a good job, be a good worker bee, pay your taxes, and buy a bunch of stuff that you don't need. And in that way, you establish your happiness, your joy. But that's not what's real. That's not what is really going on. But yet, most people are not able to see through the facade of materialism to then better understand what we are truly contending with and what this world really is all about. Because the truth of it is that we are in a fallen state and we live in a fallen world, and that our spirits are married to the flesh for a single lifetime. And for this lifetime, we are here to journey through the experience of duality, good and evil, that we are being tested and tried in a war between the angels of God and the angels of the devil, the 1/3 that joined him in rebellion, and that being cast out, exiled here to this earth, that they are now those which oppose us and those that do not in any manner want us to succeed in accepting the grace of salvation through Christ. And in that way, that being numbered amongst the elect, those that are worthy and those that truly, like the prophets of old and the patriarchs of old, it says in the scriptures that some will judge even the angels. And these angels that some end up judging or assisting Christ to bring judgment upon, they are the ones that not only abandoned their first estate and left their place of habitation, but coming here to the earth and taking wives of all which they chose, they gave up their part in salvation. They gave up their eternal, immortal, angelic being to temporarily lust to indulge in the carnal aspects of the pleasures of this world. And so that's the challenge. That's the challenge for all of us, is to overcome that temptation, that desire to indulge in sin. And, I just wrote, and we'll release it next month as part of our newsletter, but I wrote about the difficulty that especially human people have in overcoming this challenge. That for the most part, many, even if they are holy in every other aspect, that when it comes to sexual deviance, they fall away. And many don't survive such temptation. And I'm not going to name names, but there was just recently an individual that was part of the Flat Earth community that got charged with 56 counts of possession of child pornography. And somebody had made me aware of this person's, his sinful nature long ago, because just having conversation with him, he immediately began to hit on and to try to get not only one of my listeners, but several, to sext him and to engage in sexting with him. And, this is only after a short time of even reaching out, to talk to the individual about some of the work that he had done in biblical cosmology. And it's sad that he, represented in any way this knowledge and this teaching, because his perversity has certainly put a stain upon the community. And I was warned. Several people warned me about him, and I would no longer have contact with or discuss or share communication with this individual. And unfortunately, he continued in his perverse manner and now is in trouble with the law. And so, and this happens often. Look at all the pastors and, big name pastors and preachers and ministers that have been caught with prostitutes, even male prostitutes, like that. I believe his name was Tom Haggard or something of that nature. He was caught doing drugs with this male prostitute, and I mean, just perversity, you know? The Bible warns us about being outwardly comely, but inwardly dirty. And that the Pharisees were in manner like this. And we are given metaphor in the Bible as to somebody that puts up a front for being holy, but is inward soiled, corrupt, and deviant. And so anyways, with regard to Bitcoin, I do believe that, and it's interesting that, what it talks about, that it is increasing exponentially, 10 times over every year. And that it says in 2019 that it could, hit 100,000. Well, for whatever reason, the individual was right on the percentages and the value of it in the run up to where we are now. And so it makes you wonder, Certainly a lot of people do believe that Bitcoin is a revolutionary technology and that it will change individuals like Max Kaiser, John McAfee, and others. They believe that, Bitcoin will be worth in the end when people, because right now, people that are invested in it, they do not even, they're on the forefront of technology, just like when the internet was created, and then all those players like Amazon and America Online and others, web browsers, Mindscape, and, these different companies that came up and benefited from the initial creation of the infrastructure of the internet, that in similarity, Bitcoin is, as blockchain and technology in that manner, it is forcing a revolution, because even just recently, you would have to go through MoneyGram or Western Union to send money to different nations and different people in different parts of the world. And you would have to pay a high percentage. I think it was like 7% of whatever it is that you were sending. And then it would take a certain amount of time before even getting there. And, then they'd have to go to the exchange, present their ID, answer a couple questions, and then receive their money, minus the deduction, the fee for sending it. And yet, that was the only way. And now cryptocurrencies have revolutionized the sending of money and monetary wealth, that people can send cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin across borders and across, all the way the other side of the world in a matter of seconds, and have that money be available to them immediately, especially if they are in crisis or in a time of need. And that this is, the technology for investing in cryptocurrency. It's not centralized or individualized per nation on, like every nation has its own stock market. And a lot of times a company is listed on the different markets under different symbols. But here, with regard to cryptocurrency and the trade of it, it's all on one exchange I mean, as far as the network, there are different exchanges, but the price is all relative. It's all connected in similarity to the same kind of price everywhere for everybody in the world. And so there's never been a stock or a commodity or anything where everybody everywhere all could transact and invest into it in the same manner. And this truly is a world market. And Bitcoin trades 24/7. And really it's incredible in the manner, the percentage that it can increase in single day. Like there was just recently a cryptocurrency that was announced to be, it was going to be available on Coinbase, which is one of the only ways that you can buy Bitcoin with fiat money. You have to register through Coinbase. And once you do, you can convert, fiat into cryptocurrency. And on that exchange, there's just a very few limited amount of coins that you can purchase. And those coins that do get registered and named on these exchanges largely do benefit. Well, this new company named Chainlink, who also just signed a deal with Google, they went up from 54 cents to over $4 in just a matter of a week. And the percentage gain on that, I don't even know how much that is. I know it's a lot. What, 300-400%? Probably more. I really don't even know. But that kind of thing happens a lot in the cryptocurrency space. But also the other side of it is you can lose a lot as well if you're not smart about what you are doing and if you don't understand what you're doing. And because these markets are relatively new, even though they do somewhat follow traditional technical analysis, and you can use such technical analysis to determine the pulse of the market and the direction it's going to go, still nobody knows, 100%. The market lives and breathes on its own. But I do believe that people should invest a little bit into cryptocurrencies if they have availability to, because like I said, the infrastructure is just now established and there is now institutional interest. And there's a lot of money entering into the space. But you still have opportunity to purchase and to get into the market before even 3% of the population has any interest or even knows anything about cryptocurrencies. And so think of the adoption that the use of cryptocurrency, and if, like this individual says, it ends up replacing money, which it has the capacity to do, because there's no inflation, something unique amongst currencies as a store of value, and the limited availability, only 21 million Bitcoin will ever be mined. And if there's 7 billion people in the world, and if they all suddenly begin to invest in cryptocurrency. I mean, you think of like gold. I think they said it was a $6 billion market or something or $6 trillion market. And right now, the entire cryptocurrency space is only $333 billion. So think of the growth if all that money began to flood into cryptocurrency. And if you just had a little bit, how much it could increase in value. There is something I wanted to tell everybody as well, and I'll put it in the link to this particular video. There's a new company out there. I don't know if you know about Ebates, but I'll place a referral that Ebates, you add it to your browser, and you just push a button anytime you go to spend money online at a store that accepts Ebates, and it will give you a certain percentage back in cash. And then at the end of the month, and it comes out of the percentage of what you spend normally anyways to purchase online items. And so if you just click this button before you make your purchase, well, that money adds up, and then they send you a check at the end of the month. Well, there's a new company that has just come online called Lolli, Lolli, and they allow you to get a percentage back in cryptocurrency, in Bitcoin, which is truly intriguing. And it's a way for all people to begin to get a little bit of cryptocurrency just by doing, by having normal habits of spending money online. Because I know I don't like to go to the stores. I don't like to spend my time, fighting the traffic and fighting the lines, and that I do a lot of my shopping online. It's efficient for me. And so now if you can add Lolli to your Chrome extension as well. I've already implemented it. And even there's like 500 companies right now, huge companies like, Vitamin Shop and, Priceline and different companies like that. And even Pro Flowers, if you're going to send flowers to your loved ones, to your wife or your mother for Mother's Day or anything like that, you can get 5% back in Bitcoin. And so I think it's a great technology. And now instead of I use both Ebates and Lolli. And again, all you have to do is click a button when you're going to go ahead and purchase anyways. And also, I would ask those of you that do purchase through Amazon that if you go through smiles.amazon.com and you select Endeavor Freedom Incorporated, that it will benefit our nonprofit, and that we support a number of orphanages, and we give money to people that are in need. And so it's a way that you can support us without having to give directly to us in any way. Anyways, we appreciate all of you.